The fluorescent lights in conference room hummed with the same frequency as a dying migraine. I stared at the whiteboard where my 20-year career was currently being erased by a woman whose entire personality was a linked inspirational quote. "We're pivoting to a lean-forward posture," Jordan said, capping her dry erase marker with a violent click. She's the CEO's daughter-in-law. 29-year-old nightmare with an MBA from a university that probably accepts Cole's cash as tuition. "Ellen, frankly, your department feels heavy. We need agility. We need spark." I adjusted my glasses, looking at the org chart she'd drawn. My name, formerly at the top of infrastructure and digital risk, had been moved to a lonely little box in the bottom corner labeled IP archiving. It was the corporate equivalent of being sent to a farm upstate. "Archiving?" I repeated, my voice flat. "So, you're moving the servers, the encryption keys, and the patent portfolio management to where exactly? The cloud?" Jordan beamed, doing jazz hands. "We're going fully serverless. We don't need you babysitting hardware in the basement anymore. It's 2024, Evelyn. We need to democratize our data." I took a slow sip of my coffee. It was lukewarm and tasted like despair. "Jordan, the cloud is just other people's computers. Specifically, computers I leased for this company 15 years ago under a legacy contract that ensures we don't get sued into oblivion by Oracle." She waved a hand dismissively, her charm bracelet jingling like the bells on a leper. "Details. You're bogged down in the how, Evelyn. I'm looking at the why. You'll transition to the archiving role effective immediately. Budget is being slashed by 80%. But don't worry, I'm leaving you a stipend for training. We want you to upskill. Maybe learn some Python, or how to use Slack without sounding passive-aggressive." The room tittered. A few of the junior devs looked down at their shoes. They knew I was the only reason their commit history didn't crash the production environment every Tuesday. "Understood," I said. The rage was there deep in my gut, hot and distinct like a shot of bad tequila. But on the surface, I was a frozen lake. "I'll focus on archiving and training. Lots of training. By the way, if you're enjoying watching a corporate train wreck in slow motion, do me a solid and hit subscribe and upvote. My therapist says I need external validation. And since I'm about to lose my health insurance, you guys are all I've got. Okay, back to the carnage." I walked out of that meeting with a box of my personal effects, a stapler, a stress ball shaped like a grenade, and a framed photo of my dog, Buster, who had more loyalty in his left nut than this entire board of directors. I didn't go home to cry. I didn't go to a bar to drown my sorrows in cheap Chardonnay. I went straight to my new office, a converted storage closet on the 4th floor that smelled vaguely of bleach and resentment. I sat down, cracked my knuckles, and opened the compliance and training portal. Jordan wanted me to use the budget. Fine. I navigated to the external vendor registration page. I created a new profile for a consultancy firm called Veritas IP Solutions. The address was a P.O. box in Delaware. The owner, a blind trust I'd set up 3 years ago for estate planning. Then I looked at the asset list. Jordan thought she was streamlining the company. She thought she was cutting the fat. What she didn't realize was that I wasn't the fat. I was the skeleton. And she had just given me permission to start removing the bones one by one to archive them for safekeeping. I started small. The software licenses for the design team. They were up for renewal. I initiated a transfer request to move the licensing authority to Veritas IP Solutions, categorizing the expense under compliance training simulation vendor management. The system flagged it for approval. Who was the approver? Jordan. 2 hours later, I got a notification. Request approved. She hadn't even read it. She saw training and rubber-stamped it probably while ordering a matcha latte and firing a janitor on her phone. "You want Spark, Jordan?" I whispered to the flickering monitor, lighting a cigarette. "Yeah, I smoke indoors." "Sue me." "Nobody comes to the 4th floor. I'll give you a bonfire." I spent the next 6 hours quietly rewriting the ownership tags on the company's primary domain names. By the time I left, the company didn't technically own its own website anymore. I did, or rather, Veritas IP Solutions did, and the rent was due in 30 days. I walked out to the parking lot. The asphalt was slick with rain and oil. My 2014 Subaru Outback looked tired. I patted the hood. "Hang in there, girl," I muttered. "We're about to come into some money." My phone buzzed. A text from Jordan. "Hey Ev, make sure you clear out the server room by Friday. We're turning it into a meditation pod. Namaste." I stared at the screen until the backlight timed out. Meditation pod. Right where the main cooling units for the redundant backups were. I didn't reply. I just smiled. A sharp, jagged thing that felt foreign on my face. I wasn't just going to let them fail. I was going to sell them the tickets to their own funeral. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in corporate dysentery. Jordan's version of modernization looked a lot like setting a house on fire because you didn't like the color of the drapes. They brought in agile coaches, guys named things like Skylar and Braden, who wore vests over t-shirts and used words like ideation and syncoponically. They turned the bullpen into an open collaboration zone, which meant they took away the cubicle walls that separated the developers from the sales team. Now, while the engineers were trying to debug the spaghetti code that held our payment gateway together, they had to listen to Chad from sales ring a literal cowbell every time he sold a subscription. I sat in my closet office, watching the ticket queue explode. Ticket 4902. I can't access the legacy database. Ticket 4905. Why is the VPN blocking the new marketing tools? Ticket 4912. The website is down for Europe. Normally, I would be the one fixing this. I would be the one diving into the terminal, rerouting traffic, and soothing the servers like a hoarse whisper. But I wasn't in infrastructure anymore. I was in archiving. So, I forwarded every single ticket to the new chief digital officer, a guy Jordan hired because he had 50K followers on Twitter. His qualifications seemed to be posting photos of his desk setup and using the hashtag #HustlerGrind. Ellen, Jordan stopped by my door on a Tuesday, holding a green juice that looked like pond scum. She didn't come in. The room was too small, and I was actively eating a tuna sandwich to establish dominance. We're seeing some friction in the transition. Friction. I wiped a crumb from my lip. Is that what we're calling the 40% drop in uptime? She scowled. It's teething pains. Look, the new vendors are asking for the admin keys to the AWS instances. They say the current credentials aren't working. That's strange, I said, lying with the ease of a politician. I handed all those over in the transition doc. Well, they're saying the root account is locked to a specific hardware key. I nodded sagely. That's a security protocol I installed in 2018 after the Russian phishing attempt. To change the root access, you need the physical authenticator. Great. Where is it? I opened my desk drawer. It was empty except for a packet of soy sauce and a stapler. I turned it into HR with my old badge. Standard offboarding procedure. Jordan rolled her eyes. God, you boomers and your hardware. Fine. I'll hassle HR. Just keep training. Okay? Need you up to speed on the new stack. On it, boss. As soon as she clicked away down the hall, I pulled the physical authenticator key out of my bra. It was warm against my skin. The little LCD screen displayed a 6-digit code that changed every 30 seconds. This little piece of plastic was the only thing standing between the company's data and total oblivion, and it was staying right next to my left ventricle. I turned back to my screen. I had a training seminar to attend. Subject: Advanced IP Asset Structuring. Cost: $4,500. Vendor: Veritas IP Solutions. I approved the invoice myself. The finance department was in chaos because Jordan had fired the controller and replaced him with an app. No one was watching the cash flow for anything under $10,000. I spent the afternoon archiving the source code for a proprietary algorithm, the one that predicted market trends for our clients, the one that generated 80% of our revenue. I moved the repository to a private Git server hosted by, you guessed it, Veritas. Then I printed out a 300-page document. I put it in a heavy 3-ring binder. I labeled the spine: Critical Infrastructure Redundancy Audit Phase Roman II. Do not discard. I walked down to the server room, the meditation pod. The cooling units had been turned off. The room was sweltering. Bean-bag chairs were scattered around the silent, overheating racks. I placed the binder on top of the main server rack, right next to a stick of incense that was dangerously close to a bundle of fiber optic cables. I knew exactly what would happen. The cleaning crew, hired from a new disruptive gig economy app to save money, would come in tonight. They wouldn't read English well, would see a dusty binder in a chill zone. The next morning, when I walked past the dumpster out back, I saw it. My binder resting on top of a pile of discarded ergonomic chairs. I took a picture of it with my phone, timestamped, geotagged. Evidence, I whispered. I wasn't just stealing the company. I was documenting their negligence so thoroughly that when the lawsuits hit, I wouldn't just be innocent. I would be the prosecution's star witness. The grim poetry of it all was almost too much to bear. The smell of wet cardboard and trash juice filled my nose, but it smelled like victory. Or maybe that was just the garbage. The quarterly alignment mixer was held at a rooftop bar downtown that charged $20 for a cocktail that was mostly ice and pretension. It was mandatory attendance, which meant I had to put on a blazer and pretend I didn't want to throw myself off the ledge. The air was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and desperation. The stock price had dipped 12% since Jordan took over, but the DJ was blasting upbeat house music as if to drown out the sound of the shareholders screaming. I stood by a heat lamp, nursing a club soda. I was watching the new vice president of Vibe's real title try to hit on the HR director. It was grotesque. Ellen, I turned. It was Marcus, the CFO. Marcus was one of the old guard. He looked tired. The bags under his eyes had their own luggage tags. He was holding a scotch like it was an anchor keeping him from drifting away. Marcus, I said. Nice party. The shrimp is almost thawed. He didn't smile. He leaned in, lowering his voice. They're scrubbing the budget next week. Deep clean. I thought they already did that when they gutted my team. No. He shook his head, looking around to make sure Jordan wasn't nearby, who was currently taking selfies with the marketing interns. I mean, total restructuring. They're going to outsource the entire backend to a firm in Bangalore. Jordan signed the LOI this morning. Your department, the archiving role, it's gone on the 1st of the month. I felt a cold spike in my chest. Not fear, adrenaline. The 1st of the month, I repeated. That's in 4 days. I shouldn't be telling you this. Marcus sighed, taking a heavy swig of his drink. You built this place, Ev. I remember when we were soldering cables in the garage. I wanted you to have a heads up. Update your resume. Thanks, Marcus, I said softly. I appreciate it. Really. I looked at him. He was a good man, mostly just weak. He let them bulldoze him because he had 2 kids in private school and a mortgage in the suburbs. Don't worry about me, I added. I've got a plan. Good. He patted my shoulder. Keep your head down. He walked away. I watched him go, feeling a strange pang of pity. He thought he was saving me. He didn't realize he was on the Titanic, and I was the iceberg. I pulled out my phone. I didn't update my resume. I opened the admin app for the company's cloud registrar. The training budget I'd been using had allowed me to pay for a comprehensive system migration simulation. That was the cover story. The reality was that I had set up a mirror of our entire cloud environment under the Veritas IP Solutions account. All I had to do was flip the switch, point the DNS records away from the company's account and toward mine. I looked across the rooftop. Jordan was laughing, her head thrown back, a flute of champagne in her hand. She looked so confident, so untouchable. She thought technology was magic. She thought you just paid a subscription and things worked. She didn't understand that technology is plumbing. And if you piss off the plumber, you're going to drown in. I tapped the screen. Confirm DNS migration. Yes. A little loading circle spun. I took a sip of my club soda. Migration complete. Propagation time 24 to 48 hours. By Monday morning, the company wouldn't just be outsourcing their back end. They would be trespassing on it. I finished my drink and walked over to the buffet. I picked up a skewer of chicken sauté.
It was dry.
Hey, Ellen. Jordan shouted over the music, waving me over. I walked toward her, forcing a smile that felt like I was baring my teeth. Great party, right? She yelled. We're really building culture here. It's certainly something, I shouted back. Hey, I wanted to ask, she leaned in, smelling of white wine and expensive hairspray. Did you finish that training on, what was it? IP compliance. Oh, absolutely, I said, my voice steady. I passed the final exam tonight. Love that growth mindset. She high-fived me. Her hand was clammy. We're going to need you to train the new team in Bangalore next week before before you fire me, I offered. She blinked, her smile faltering for a nanosecond before recovering. Before we transition. Don't be so dramatic.
Right.
Transition. I checked my watch. The propagation had started. Somewhere in a server farm in Virginia, a digital handshake was happening. The locks were being changed. I pulled out my phone again and drafted a quick email to Marcus. Subject: Thank you. Body: Marcus. Thanks for the drink. If things collapse next week, check your personal email. I've sent you a file containing the metadata for your pension fund. I made sure it's backed up externally. You might need it to prove you didn't embezzle anything when the audit happens.
Ev.
I hit send. Then I walked out of the party, leaving the noise and the fake smiles behind. The elevator ride down was silent. I hummed a little tune. It was the Jeopardy theme song. Time was ticking. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. The air in the office was different, charged with a static panic. People were hovering around printers that refused to print. The coffee machine, which was IoT-enabled for some godforsaken reason, was displaying a network error message. I sat in my closet waiting. 9:02 a.m. My screen flickered. A pop-up window appeared. Your session has expired. Please log in again. I typed in my password. Account locked. Contact administrator. Here we go. I tried to access my email on my phone. Authentication failed. They weren't waiting for the first of the month.
They were doing it now.
A company-wide announcement blared over the PA system. It was the new IT director, the hashtag guy. Attention team. We are experiencing a minor security incident. A sophisticated phishing attack has compromised several legacy accounts. As a precaution, we are locking down all non-essential access. Please reboot your machines and wait for further instructions. Phishing attack. I laughed out loud. A dry, hacking sound that startled a spider in the corner of the room. They were framing me, or at least using security as the cover to lock me out before they marched me out. It was the oldest trick in the book. Blame the person you're firing for a breach, so you can escort them out without severance. My phone buzzed. It was a text from the IT automated system which I had programmed 3 years ago to alert me of any admin changes. Alert: User Ellen are removed from group admin. Alert: User Ellen are removed from group VPN access. Alert: User Ellen are removed from group cafeteria rewards.
Petty.
They even took my free sandwich points. It hurt more than the admin rights. I leaned back in my chair, putting my feet up on the desk. They thought they were locking me out of the building. They didn't realize I had already moved the building. The lockout was actually perfect. It confirmed that they had no idea what was happening on the back end. If they had checked the DNS records, they would have seen the migration, but they were too busy locking the front door to notice the foundation was sliding away. I opened my personal laptop, a ruggedized ThinkPad I kept in my bag. I connected to the guest Wi-Fi. Password: Innovation 2024, because of course it was. I logged into the Veritas IP Solutions dashboard. The dashboard was a sea of green lights. Asset: Domain names secure. Asset: Cloud instances secure. Asset: Software licensing secure. I watched the traffic logs. I could see the company's internal requests hitting my servers. Request: Payroll database access. Status: Allowed for now. I had set a timer, 72 hours. For the next 3 days, everything would work normally. The training simulation mirrored the live environment perfectly. They wouldn't know they were running on my infrastructure. They wouldn't know they were burning my bandwidth. But on Friday, the lease would expire. There was a knock on my door, sharp, aggressive. It didn't open because I had wedged a chair under the handle. Ellen, open up. It was the head of HR, a woman named Linda, who smiled with her mouth but wanted to murder you with her eyes. I removed the chair and opened the door. Linda was standing there with two security guards, Paul and Dave. I knew Paul. We used to smoke together behind the loading dock. He looked ashamed. Evelyn, Linda said, clutching a clipboard like a shield. We need you to come to conference room B immediately. Is this about the phishing attack? I asked, eyeing innocence. It's about a serious misappropriation of company funds, she snapped. Bring your badge and your laptop. I can't bring the laptop, I said. It's locked. Just bring it. I grabbed my bag. I looked at the framed photo of Buster. I left it there. I'd be back for it. Or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I'd buy the building and turn this closet into a shrine for him. Hey, Paul, I nodded to the guard. Sorry, Ev, he muttered, looking at the floor. It's okay, I whispered as I walked past him. Make sure you cash your paycheck by Friday morning. His eyes widened. He didn't ask why, he just nodded. We walked the long hallway to the executive suite. People stared. The perp walk. It was designed to humiliate, to make everyone else afraid. I kept my head high. My boots squeaked on the polished concrete. I wasn't a prisoner walking to the gallows. I was the executioner walking to the switch. I entered conference room. Jordan was there. The legal counsel was there. The IT guy was there. And in the center of the table was a stack of papers. My training invoices. Sit down, Evelyn, Jordan said. Her voice was trembling slightly. She was excited. She finally had a reason to kill the witch. I sat. The leather chair squeaked. So, I said, looking around the table. Who wants to start? The air conditioning in conference room was set to Arctic, presumably to preserve Jordan's Botox. She sat at the head of the table, flanked by the lawyer, a man who looked like he billed by the heavy sigh, and the IT director, who was frantically typing on a tablet that wasn't connected to anything. Evelyn, the lawyer began, sliding the stack of papers toward me. We've been reviewing the departmental spend for the last quarter. Riveting reading, I'm sure, I said. Jordan slammed her hand on the table. Cut the crap. You spent over $150,000 on training and compliance in 3 months. Webinars, workshops. Who the hell is Veritas IP Solutions? A specialized vendor, I replied calmly, leaning back. They handle high-level infrastructure certification and asset management simulation. It was all approved. Approved by who? She demanded. By you, Jordan. I reached into my bag. The security guards tensed as if I was going to pull out a weapon, and retrieved a folder. I slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was the budget authorization form. Signed, Jordan Koo, dated 2 months ago. She snatched the paper, her eyes scanning it. Her face flushed a blotchy red. I sign hundreds of these a week. I didn't know you were funneling money to a shell company. Careful with the accusations, I said, my voice dropping an octave. Veritas is a legitimate entity. Every dollar spent resulted in a tangible deliverable. Certificates were issued. Assets were processed. The IT director piped up. We can't find any record of this training in the HR portal. Because it wasn't HR training, I explained slowly as if talking to a toddler. It was technical compliance. The deliverables are in the cloud, which we can't access. Jordan screamed. Because you locked us out. I didn't lock anything, I said. The system locked me out. Probably a security protocol. If I were still the admin, I could fix it in 5 minutes. But since I'm just the archivist, you're fired. Jordan spat the words out. For cause. Gross misconduct. Embezzlement. Incompetence. Embezzlement is a strong word, the lawyer murmured, looking nervous. Maybe we just stick to restructuring. No. Jordan stood up. I want her gone. I want her sued. I want her 401k frozen. She pointed a manicured finger at me. You are a dinosaur, Evelyn. You've been bleeding this company dry for years with your expensive servers and your legacy. We're done. Get out. I stood up slowly. My knees popped. Okay, I said. That's it. She looked confused. She wanted a fight. She wanted me to beg. That's it, I said. You're firing me. I accept. But Jordan, one piece of advice. I don't want your advice. You're going to need it, I said, walking to the door. I paused with my hand on the handle. You mentioned the servers were expensive.
You were right. They are.
And now that you've fired the person who managed the lease, you're going to find out exactly how expensive they really are. Get out. Paul and Dave escorted me to the lobby. I handed over my badge. Good luck, guys, I said. I walked out the front doors into the blinding sunlight. I took a deep breath. It smelled of exhaust and freedom. I walked to my Subaru, got in, lit a Marlboro. My hands were shaking just a little, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. I picked up my phone. I logged into the Veritas app. Tenant. Redacted corporation status. Delinquent. I changed the status flag. Action. Initiate termination sequence. Timer. 72 hours. You want a dinosaur? I exhaled a cloud of smoke at the windshield. I'll show you an extinction event. I put the car in drive and headed home. I had a lot of packing to do. I needed to buy some popcorn. Friday came, the day of the apocalypse. I was sitting on my porch drinking a coffee that had a splash of whiskey in it. It was 10 a.m. I was wearing my pajamas. My phone started blowing up around 9:15. First, it was the automated alerts from my old team, the ones who hadn't been fired yet. Hey, Ev, did you change the SSL cert on the payment portal? Chrome is throwing a security warning. Ev, API calls to Salesforce are bouncing. Error 4004. Evelyn, are you there? The entire customer database is showing up as encrypted. I didn't answer. I just watched the notifications roll in like a ticker tape of doom. At 10:30, the IT director called me. I let it go to voicemail. Then he called again and again. I listened to the third voicemail. Evelyn, look, man. I don't know what you did, but everything is red. Dashboard says license expired. What license? We paid Microsoft. Call me back. I chuckled. He thought it was a Microsoft license.
Cute.
By noon, the company's public-facing website was replaced by a generic holding page. This domain is parked courtesy of Veritas IP Solutions. Contact owner for inquiries. I could only imagine the scene inside the office. The sales team couldn't close deals because the CRM was offline. Developers couldn't push code because the Git repo was locked. HR couldn't even process payroll because the secure gateway to the bank was routed through, well, me. Around 1 p.m., I got a text from Paul, the security guard. Chaos. Jordan is screaming at a laptop. The new IT guy is crying in the break room. Someone threw a chair through the glass wall of the meditation pod. Miss you. I texted back. Keep your head down, Paul. At 2 p.m., realization must have hit them. The new IT guy, let's call him Twitter Boy, finally did what he should have done days ago. He ran a WHOS lookup on the domain and the IP blocks. He would see the owner, Veritas IP Solutions. He would check the invoices. He would see the training budget, and he would find the certificate I had left for him. I had hidden it in the digital metadata of the goodbye party JPG file I uploaded to the shared drive before I left. Opened, the image wasn't a party photo. It was a certificate of ownership. Asset custody certificate. All digital infrastructure, including but not limited to domain names, server leases, and cloud topology, is the sole property of Veritas IP Solutions. Usage rights granted to company name are revocable at will. The phone rang again. This time it wasn't the IT guy. It wasn't Jordan. It was the number for the CEO's private line. Not Jordan. Her father-in-law. The old man Richard. He had been retired for 2 years, spending his time golfing in Florida and letting his family run the business into the ground. He never called unless the building was on fire. Well, the building wasn't on fire, but the virtual building had just been nuked from orbit. I let it ring 3 times. I took a sip of my spiked coffee. I picked up. Hello, Evelyn. Richard's voice was gravel and smoke. Sounded like he was about to have a stroke. What the hell is going on? Jordan says you hacked us. She says you're holding the company for ransom. Ransom is such an ugly word, Richard, I said, watching a squirrel bury a nut in my lawn. I prefer asset management negotiation. This is illegal, Evelyn. Richard roared. I have lawyers on the other line. I'll have the FBI at your door in an hour. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Richard, I said, keeping my voice level. It's not a hack. I have the receipts. Jordan signed them. She signed what? Transfer of ownership forms disguised as compliance training. She authorized the budget. She authorized the transfer of the IP to a third-party vendor to mitigate risk. That vendor is Veritas IP Solutions, which I own. There was a silence on the line. Heavy.
Stunned.
She signed over the IP? She didn't read what she was signing, Richard. She never does. She was too busy pivoting. Documents clearly stated that the company was divesting its legacy infrastructure to a managed service provider. That's me. I am the provider. You tricked her. I followed procedure. I corrected. I submitted the forms. I got approval. I executed the plan. The fact that your COO is legally illiterate is not my problem. Fix it, he growled. Turn it back on now. I can't just turn it on, Richard. We have a billing dispute. Your company is currently utilizing my proprietary infrastructure without a valid contract. The previous lease expired at noon today. How much? He asked. The fight was leaving his voice. He was a businessman. He knew when he was cornered. Well, I did some mental math. The old rate was subsidized by me, by my unpaid overtime, by my stress, by the weekends I spent fixing your messes. The new rate? It's market value plus a stupidity premium. Give me a number. I want a 5-year licensing agreement for the use of the infrastructure. Non-cancelable guaranteed payments.
Fine.
How much?
$4 million a year, I said.
The silence stretched out. The old budget for my entire department was maybe $800K. That's extortion, he whispered. That's the price of agility, I countered. Jordan wanted to move to the cloud. Welcome to the cloud, Richard. It rains here. I'll sue you. Tie this up in court for years.
You can try, I said.
But court cases take time.
Your servers are down now.
Your customers can't log in now. Your data is encrypted now. Every hour you're offline, you lose $50,000. Do the math. Can you afford to wait for a judge to read the fine print? He breathed heavily into the phone. I could hear the golf cart rattling in the background. If I pay, you turn it back on instantly? And Jordan, that's an internal personnel matter, I said. But I suspect her training is complete. I'll send the contract, he said. But Evelyn, you're done in this town. You'll never work in tech again. Richard, I laughed. With $4 million a year, I'm not looking for a job. I'm retiring. I hung up. My hands were sweating now. I wiped them on my pajama pants. I had one, but I wasn't done yet. There was one more loose end. The physical office. The company leased their fancy downtown office space. It was a prime location. Exposed brick, glass walls, espresso machine. What they didn't know, what even Richard didn't know, was who the landlord was. Years ago, the company had been in trouble. They needed cash. They sold the building to a holding company and leased it back. That holding company was Red Brick Trust, and the primary beneficiary of Red Brick Trust was my late father's estate, which I managed. Jordan had been late on the rent for 3 months. She kept saying the check is in the mail, claiming they were switching payment processors. In commercial real estate, 3 months is an eviction event. I looked at the clock. 2:30 p.m. I picked up the phone again. Hello, Sheriff's Office? Yes, this is Evelyn regarding the eviction notice for the property on 4th and Main. Yes, the paperwork is ready. Go ahead and serve it. Richard was frantically having his lawyers draft a $4 million surrender treaty. Jordan was trying to rally the troops. According to Paul's texts, she was standing on a desk in the bullpen shouting about sabotage and industrial espionage. She had called the local news. A van was parked outside. She was going to play the victim. She was going to spin this as a cyber-terrorist attack by a disgruntled employee. It was a good play. It might have even worked. Except she didn't have a building to do it in. At 3:15 p.m., 2 sheriff's deputies walked into the lobby. They weren't there to arrest me. They were holding a large orange sticker. Paul texted me, "Cops here. Are you in trouble?" I replied, "No, but Jordan is." Watch the front door. The deputies walked past reception, where the receptionist was currently crying because her Instagram wouldn't load, and headed for the elevators. They went up to the executive floor. I wasn't there, but I knew the script. I had written it. They would ask for the person in charge. Jordan would step forward, thinking they were there to take her statement about the hack. They would hand her the document. Notice to quit. Eviction for non-payment of rent. The lease for the office space had a strict clause: automatic termination upon 90 days of delinquency. Jordan had prioritized paying the Agile coaches over paying the rent. She assumed the landlord, some faceless trust, would be lenient. She assumed she could charm them. She didn't know the landlord was the woman she called a dinosaur. I imagined her face. The confusion, then the rage. You can't evict us. We're a tech company. Ma'am, you have 24 hours to vacate the premises, or we will remove your property to the curb. The irony was delicious. She wanted to move everything to the cloud. Well, now she had to because she didn't have a floor anymore. My email pinged. It was the contract from Richard. DocuSign licensing agreement between company and Veritas IP Solutions. Amount: $4 million per annum. Terms: immediate execution. I signed it on my phone. Evelyn R. Then I sent a reply. Subject: Contract Richard, contract received and signed. Systems will be restored within the hour. However, please note that this agreement covers digital infrastructure only. It does not cover physical office space. I understand your current lease has been terminated. If you wish to negotiate a new commercial lease, my rates have also pivoted.
Ev.
I poured myself another drink. The sun was starting to dip lower. I decided I would go into the office one last time, not to work, but to collect. I pulled up to the office building at 5 p.m. The sun was setting, casting long, bloody shadows across the glass facade. People were standing on the sidewalk with boxes. The eviction had started. The news van was there, but the reporter looked bored. It's hard to make "accounting error leads to eviction" sound sexy for the 6 o'clock news. I walked through the sliding doors. The lobby was chaos. People were arguing. Someone was stealing the espresso machine. Paul saw me.
He tipped his cap.
He didn't stop me. I took the elevator up to the 4th floor, to the server room. The meditation pod door was propped open with a yoga block. Inside, the servers were silent, dark. Jordan was there. She was sitting on a beanbag chair staring at a blank monitor. Her makeup was smeared. She looked very young and very small. She looked up when I entered. "You," she whispered. "You did this." "I did exactly what you asked, Jordan," I said, walking over to the main console. I archived the assets. I managed the vendors. I streamlined the overhead. "You destroyed the company." "No, I saved it. For a price." I sat down at the console. I plugged in my physical authenticator key, the one I had kept in my bra. The screen flickered to life. A green cursor blinked in the darkness. "Richard signed the deal," I said, my fingers flying over the keyboard. "You have your servers back. But the building, you'll have to talk to my real estate agent about that. And I warn you, she's a bitch." "Why?" Jordan asked, tears streaming down her face. "Why burn it all down?" "Because you didn't respect the plumbing," I said softly. "You thought you could just paint over the rust and call it innovation. You forgot that someone has to keep the lights on." I hit the final command. Restore system image Y/N. I pressed Y, enter. The room hummed. The fan spun up. The lights on the racks began to blink. A cascading waterfall of green LEDs. The hum grew louder. A roar of air and power. The AC kicked in, blasting freezing air into the room, blowing Jordan's hair back. The monitors in the hallway lit up. The phone started ringing. The network error signs vanished. I stood up. "You're back online," I said. "Try not to break it." I walked to the door. "Wait," Jordan called out. "What about the training budget? The money?" "Oh, that." I smiled. "Consider it a consulting fee. You got a very expensive education today, Jordan. I hope you learned something." I walked out. I took the elevator down. I walked past the weeping receptionist, Past the confused deputies. Past Paul. "See you around, Paul," I said. "I'll send you a job offer next week. I need a head of security for my new venture." He grinned. "You got it, boss." I got into my Subaru. I didn't look back at the building. I didn't need to. I owned it. I drove home, the window down, the cold air rushing in. My phone buzzed. Bank notification. Wire transfer received. $4 million. I turned up the radio. It was playing classic rock. I lit a cigarette. I was unemployed. I was a pariah. I was the old tech lady. And I had never felt more alive. Later that night, I sent one final invoice to the company's accounts payable system, which was now running on my servers. Invoice number 001 description. Final training session. Identifying real ownership. Amount. $1. I drank alone to the sound of Danny DeVito ASMR on my new 85-inch TV. We're all healed. Not every victory needs applause or a corner office. Sometimes walking away with your dignity is the real promotion. Thanks for being here. Well, I'll catch you in the next story.